Hello, and thanks for downloading the Farming Today podcast from BBC Radio 4. I'm Kaz Graham, and coming up, harvesting this year's lavender crop in the Lake District. And not fit for purpose. That's the verdict on the firearms licensing system from the body that oversees it. First, though, with drought, climate change and many demands on the land, scientists and food producers are looking at the best crops to grow for the future. And that's something that we've been focusing on this week too. Researchers at the University of Essex are using gene editing technology to create dwarf cucumber and pepper plants better suited to indoor vertical farms and glasshouses. By improving their shape and shortening their stems, they hope to boost yields, reduce water use and help expand year-round production of salad crops in the UK. Theo White went to meet Dr. Andrew Simpkin.
We walked into what I would call a fairly traditional laboratory environment, and then we've walked round a corner and towards something that looks a little bit more like a Berlin nightclub, illuminated with pink light, walls of tiny little cuttings of plants. So tell me about this, Sandy.
This is a vertical farm. The great thing about vertical farms is that we can control the light that we give any plant. Plants obviously don't use all of the white light we see outside. They use primarily red light with a little bit of blue light, and that's what gives this pinkish colour to our growing facility. This is what we call a grow frame. What's really key about this is there's actually no soil at all in this system. And then how we actually water these is we spray them with an aerosol of liquid, and that liquid could contain anything we want. We mist the roots with this nutrient liquid. That liquid would drip down the roots and come out the bottom, and then the great thing about that is we can recover that water and use it again. So we're actually working with tomato and cucumber. What we're trying to do is adapt them using genome editing, or precision breeding as it's known, to change their morphology so that they can grow better in a system like this. And one of the reasons for that, or two of the reasons, is one, is we've got a better controlled environment, we use significantly less water, but also, importantly, we can produce a far greater crop in a much smaller space. And I think that's really key going forward in the future when space becomes limited, that we can still actually feed a growing population.
So gene editing, tell me exactly what you've done to these plants.
So if we look at a lot of the crops we grow, if we look at wheat, for example, traditional wheat that we grew back in the 50s and 60s, they were very tall, very spindly, often fell over in the wind. A mutant was identified, which led to a short, stocky plant, which produced the same yield of grain. What we're trying to do is, through genome editing, is edit those same genes we find in tomato and cucumber. By doing so, what we're looking to do is basically shorten the stem length of those plants and yet maintain the yield.
Andy, we're in this kind of excitingly lit Blade Runner style colour palette here, and it's making me think about the future. Where can this technology take us, do you think?
Well, the technology we have here in Steps is more than just this vertical farm. The rooms we have here, we can study how the plants we grow today can grow in the environments of the future. So we can actually manipulate the environments within these chambers to study how our plants, our crops will grow, say, in 2050. That will allow us to take those results and either through precision breeding or other breeding techniques to adapt our crops to those new grown environments. I think this is important going forward to maintain a stable food supply, not just for the people of this country, but for the world.
Andrew Simpkin. Now, there are around 50 farmers across the UK growing lavender as part of their cropping, often as a diversification, some with up to 100 acres of plants, while others are on a much more modest scale. And although we often associate this fragrant shrub with hotter climes like Provence in the south of France, it can thrive in Britain. When Sandi Thornton started growing lavender on her 30-acre farm in the south of the Lake District, some neighbours did raise a quizzical eyebrow. But 2 years on, the lavender beds are getting established and there's a distinctly purple haze across part of Cumbria's Lyth Valley. I went to take a closer look.
Okay, so I'm basically going to harvest this. So I'm gathering it, almost like a sheath of corn, and you're trying to imagine it, but like a giant ponytail. And you just hold it underneath the plant, and off you go with the hand shear, and round you go, and you just about get every single lavender bud in one go.
On a hot, sunny day like today, you can smell this farm before you actually see it. In fact, I met a man on the road while I was coming up here, and I said, do you know where the lavender farm is? And he said, follow your nose.
Just snipping off the last little bits there. Put it in a nice neat pile to be collected at the side.
And this is one of your rows of lavender. How much lavender are you growing here now?
There's 5,000 plants at the moment. We probably will put some more in. It becomes a bit addictive.
And it's really striking, this lavender field. You don't really expect to see it on a Lake District hillside. Why are you growing lavender? Why did you think it would work here?
Basically, I had a little bit of experience growing lavender. And when we bought the farm, we were entirely new farmers without any equipment and really without any knowledge. And we were going, what can we do with that south-facing hill? So we thought we had to play to our strengths. So we put 35 plants in and did a micro test. And we put those in for 6 months and they were great. The soil itself was kind of perfect because it's not in good condition, yet it's absolutely chock-a-block rammed full of limestone, which is brilliant because it creates the right pH for the lavender, coupled with it being on a south-facing slope. All those factors add up to this being a really unique field.
And looking at these lavender plants here, if we just walk along between the rows, they kind of look like the lavender plants that you might have in part of your garden. How did you research what lavender to grow? Because presumably there's lots of different varieties, are there?
Yeah, there's loads of different varieties. I mean, if you're commercially growing lavender, you need to grow something that you can use. So this is actually French lavender. It's called lavandin grosso. It's basically the same plant that's grown in Provence because it yields the most oil. Most of the field is planted for oil so that we can then make products afterwards. But we have another section that we're working on now, slightly over the hill, which is all culinary. But that's also prettier, and that's often English lavender because it's lower in camphor, which basically means it's easier to eat on the palate.
Sandi, there's a bee just right next to your head. I mean, that is one of the things, well, let's just waft it away. That is one of the things. You've got a lot of bees, and I can see butterflies all around here as well.
Yeah, we've been absolutely shocked. These are all bees and butterflies that were not here before. We're going to be doing some work investigating all these different bees because they definitely weren't here before, and they're going off in this wider community and pollinating anything that's growing on farms, other farms that need pollinating. So it's super exciting what these bees that weren't here before are going off to do.
Well, we've come down to the farm buildings, lovely ancient stone-built farm buildings here, and there is a waft of lavender scent that is going through the air here. Actually, just before we go in, there's a cylindrical metal barrel, outside here. What is this?
This is the commercial still that's just arrived. So we're just in the process of building that.
It's a new still.
It's a new still because we've grown out of our original copper still that came from Portugal. So we're just in here looking at that now.
It's like a still that you get in a whiskey distillery, really, but just in miniature. And this is the liquid coming out.
That's the essential oil. It's very potent. We are basically collecting the oil to make lots of products with. Pure essential oil, grown and made and distilled in the Lake District.
Sandi Thornton in South Cumbria. The system for licensing firearms and shotguns in England and Wales is not fit for purpose and should be replaced to ensure public safety. That's the conclusion of a report published today by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. Licences are currently issued by local police forces, but the Inspectorate found unclear guidance and legislation and a postcode lottery when it comes to the level of scrutiny of applicants. It's calling for a new national firearms licensing authority, and it has more than 20 further recommendations for the government, including aligning the rules for licensing firearms, like rifles, with those for less powerful shotguns, which are widely used by farmers for controlling vermin and in grouse and pheasant shooting. Currently, to deny a licence, the police must prove that you don't have a good reason to use a shotgun, while for a firearm, an applicant must actively prove that they do have a good reason to own each individual weapon. His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, Lee Freeman, has been telling me what they think is wrong with the current system.
During our report, we found that there were significant variations in suitability checks carried out on applications for firearms and shotgun licences. We found an outdated and overly complex legal framework. We found fragmented guidance that was open to interpretation and was also leading to inconsistencies. And we also found inconsistent training in the local forces, with some of the key roles in the firearms and explosive licensing units, of which there are 38 across England and Wales, still lacking national training. So our conclusions is the current system is not fit for purpose. The system should protect public safety and, of course, support legitimate access to firearms and shotguns by the many, many responsible owners that there are around the country. But the current system is not consistent, it's not robust enough, and it's not clear. So the recommendations are very much about simplifying and modernising the firearms legislative framework that underpins that, as well as recommending a new national firearms licensing authority to ensure that there is a consistent approach and a better service for the many lawful and responsible firearms and shotgun owners out there.
Now, you are recommending that firearms and shotguns are treated in the same way. There are currently separate rules for them. Just explain what the difference between a firearm and a shotgun is, if you could.
Well, both are currently treated very differently. It makes no sense that lethal barreled weapons, which they both are treated very differently. What we do highlight in the report is that tragic cases in recent years have been where perpetrators have committed multiple murders with shotguns, which have slightly less stringent rules around their purchase and security than Section 1 firearms. So I absolutely recognise that alignment will have some implications for certificate holders, licensing units and the gun trade. But the recommendations, if implemented in their totality, in my view, will minimise these impacts, because we are creating a far more effective and efficient and consistent system for the many responsible holders, while strengthening public safety by aligning the legislation around what are both lethal barreled weapons to something that is reflective of modern society and bringing the legislation up to date. And that is our recommendations.
I mean, some rural bodies like the Countryside Alliance argue that if you do lump them in together, it will add costs and also a logistical burden to people in the countryside who rely on guns. You know, people like farmers who have to control pests, and also the shooting industry.
We recognise that Great Britain has a restrictive firearms licensing regime compared to many countries, but I'm not simply calling for tighter controls. Actually, whilst I understand if that recommendation was the only one on the table, that would be a concern that I would understand, but I'm not simply calling for some tighter controls around shotguns. We're recommending a clearer, more consistent and more robust system, which at the moment is fragmented. Forces interpret and apply legislation and guidance differently, and this creates real inconsistency in the decision-making, the risk management and the service that the many people who rely on firearms and shotguns for their occupations as well as their recreation are getting what I would describe as a very inconsistent and often in many cases poor service. If that whole system is changed, I genuinely think that a more effective and efficient system will be in place to service and provide what currently, for many people who would be concerned about that, is a very poor service to them. So I'd ask people not to look at the legislative synergy in isolation, but to think of it in terms of improving the whole system together. And I generally think that will be better for everybody.
That's His Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary, Lee Freeman. And that's all from us for this morning. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Beatrice Fenton. And Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.